Welcome to the FullyCrypto podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the FullyCrypto podcast, your home of quality cryptocurrency and blockchain news, reviews, opinion and more. My name is Mark Hunter, and with me as usual is the man that Vogue magazine voted the 136th most eligible bachelor in Malta, Mr. Alex Mears.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Very well indeed. How's Malta today?
It's nice, actually. A bit rainy, but just like home, I suppose, isn't it? How's it there with you?
It's nice. It was a nice sunny day today. A bit of rain, but you can't really complain too much. It's autumn, so we can't expect too much from the current.
It's to be expected,
situation.
isn't it?
It is. And joining us tonight is Arthur van Pelt, who is a well-known... Well, I mean, how would you describe yourself, Arthur? Would you say you're a Craig Wright aficionado, a Craig Wright ultra-skeptic?
Yeah, that's probably a good word for it. I mostly call myself just a researcher, and we'll probably get into the details of how it came that I went in so deep a bit later. But I call myself a researcher and a big critic of the guy because he claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto, and I do not agree with that.
I think that's a nice simple way of putting it. I think there's a few more stronger ways we could phrase that, but certainly. To anyone who doesn't know Arthur, they might be familiar with having seen him on Twitter. Anyone who's dared to look up Craig Wright or even Calvin Ayre for that matter on Twitter, you're usually there rebutting any of his spurious claims and all the stuff the BSV lot are putting about. Would that be fair? A fair assessment of your daily Twitter activity?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hobby. I don't do this full time. It might look like it, and sometimes I do spend a few hours per day looking at the court documents and other stuff, especially the reading part. But I mostly do that at night, and then I make a few screenshots for a few tweets the next day, and then I look very productive. But yeah, if you do that for a long while, you become a kind of a specialist, and let's call it an amateur expert. And I pretend to know a little bit about the guy. It happened because last year in when was it? In March, roughly around March, I noticed that he was starting to chase Adam Beck, Hodlnaut, Roger Ver, etc. A handful of people, and suing them for libel. What especially annoyed me very much was a $5,000 bounty that he put on the head of Hodlnaut to get people to dox him. And that enraged me, for a bit. And that was the moment that I kind of dedicated my Twitter account, my legacy kit, for debunking and bringing together all the stuff that has already been debunked, creating a website where I put it all online. And now I'm kind of a little, let's call it obsessed with it, but I call it a healthy obsession because the guy is really, a scammer.
Yeah, he's a piece of work. So yeah, do you get? I mean, I'm assuming that you do get people saying pretty nasty things to you and making threats against your person.
Yeah, it happens. Although I found a trick to avoid that a little. On Twitter, I block, and by now that's running in the hundreds of them. If they don't block me, and they tend to block me, the hardcore fans of Calvin and Craig, they do block me. But most of the time, I'm front running them, and I block them to avoid it. But I do remember I had last year in May. That's when I started to do that. I had it was a bit of a funny event that I created. Craig was registering his claim at the Copyright Office in the United States of America. And he claimed to have copyright on the Bitcoin white paper and some software and etc. And that made some headlines. And I thought, well, if you can do that, I can do that also. So I did. And I put that on Twitter also, of course. And then that's when a lot of rubbish came my way. And even a few death threats with knives and you're going to die, boy, and things like that. And that's when I started to block those people. But for the rest, it's a fun business, I can tell you, because it's quite hilarious what this guy is doing.
Well, we're not going to go through his entire history because I think there's a lot of people have, you especially yourself, has documented all the things that have led where we are now. So I thought what we might do is take one or two instances, maybe the biggest drivers that have led us to where we are in the current situation with him. And we can look at those in a bit more detail and just see why he does what he does. So I thought we would start with what I perceive to be the moment that this all started. You may disagree, that you may think things go back further than this, but in terms of his public kind of outing, if you like, for me, I think that goes back to the Gizmodo and the Wired articles of 2015, where they wrote about how this guy, we've found these leaked emails and this guy's invented Bitcoin. Tell me about what you know about those two articles and how they came about.
Yeah, that is just to bring it up. He started with his what we now call Satoshi Act much earlier, but on small scale and in more private scale, which did not get so much traction. And that is how he came up with. We cannot really prove it, but it's pretty clear that he self-doxed. It was not that he was being hacked. That is for years also one of his claims, that he is hacked all the time and in all kinds of ways. But it is my firm belief that he self-doxed himself, because we know that before Gizmodo and Wired, there were several other news outlets that received those fake emails that this so-called hacker knew about who is Satoshi, and they tried to send this stuff around. And several other news outlets refused to give it attention. But it ended up that, and it's already happened, by the way, in October, and Gizmodo Wired was in December. Mm-hmm. And they thought, let's spend a few weeks researching it a bit. And the only thing they did was Google around. And well, although they were kind of critical, and I think by now both have already withdrawn that story that they believe that he is Satoshi Nakamoto, of course. But it ended up that exactly on the day that he got 2 raids in his house and office by the ATO, which is another great story to tell. On that same day, Wired and Gizmodo published that he might be the guy, Satoshi Nakamoto.
And it is interesting because they seemed convinced that he was what these leaked documents purported him to be, but it didn't take them long to change their minds. Do you know what it was that that made them change their minds on their story?
Yeah, it was more or less in the details. For example, there was some ATO material, some snapshots from ATO hearings where he explained in earlier days, if I remember well, February 2014, where he was already starting to hint to the ATO that he was an early miner and was involved with the creation of Bitcoin, because at that moment he already, like I said, in kind of more or less private setting, he already started hinting to those things. And it didn't feel right. There were several connections that could not be made by those journalists and also people who were checking the more technical things out. Emails, if I'm right, there was also an email with a date from a domain that was not even existing at the moment that email, which was, as we know now, a forgery by Craig Wright. Which he, of course, claims that it was a hack by somebody else. But let's presume that everything that he says about those things is actually a forgery done by himself. And they figured out in the more finer details, it does not, it's not correct. It does not fit. It stinks.
For a man who was clearly very intelligent, the missteps he took, they seem almost purposeful, because in allowing himself to be traced so easily, do you think he was naive? Do you think he didn't expect them to go to such detail? Do you think he expected them to just take it hook, line and sinker? Why do you think he was so lax in the way he went about that?
No, that you're kind of nailing it there, I think, because he was probably not expecting too much scrutiny on the material that he provided as quote quote evidence. And especially the scrutiny by the ATO, I think, must have surprised him, because several stories that were debunked by the ATO hardly or never came up later anymore. And the reports about them were only provided in the Climate versus Wright lawsuit more recently, a few months ago. And of course, he never published or used those final reports by the ATO, which were from later date, 2015 and 16, when they ended their civil inquiry on the guy, on all his tax claims and the fraud that he did there, which run up to, well, I made a calculation of at least the material that we know about, but I presume the number is even more higher. But it runs in the 100 million Australian dollar that he tried to scam from the ATO.
Wow.
But why would someone even want to say that they are Satoshi, especially when you think how much tax you've got to pay and how many people are going to pester you about it? Why would you even want all that trouble in the first place?
It grew on him. If you look at it, like I said, more in smaller settings and more in private, he started to hint about those things to test the waters, but he had to, because it grew. It grew in late 2012. He kind of had most of the times I call it a kind of legit idea, that he wanted to do something with Bitcoin and started as an entrepreneur with Bitcoin. And I always around it in the Bitcoin bank, because that was the first big public reveal that he did in early 2014, that he wanted to do Denarius, which was in Australia, which was a Bitcoin bank. But when he could not get funding, this is my opinion. I cannot fully prove it. I can only say the things that I read, the depositions that I have read about it, is how I see the trajectory go. When he could not get funding for that Bitcoin bank thing, he thought, let's do a tax scam, which he started up after Dave Kleiman's death in the second half of 2013. And from there, it grew on him that he had to explain large holdings of Bitcoin, which he claimed to have. But when the ATO asked him, can you sign these addresses? Because also the ATO knew about Bitcoin and how it works and how you can prove ownership of those things. He never did. He never did. He always had an excuse or forgot about it or whatever. So he, just like in 2016 and later, he never signed an actual address of what we think or know is a Satoshi address. But at some point, he made forgeries claiming to do early mining with Dave Kleiman. He claimed that he was involved in software and intellectual property, and the story grew and grew and grew. And instead of, when he's being called out, he does not back off. When he's called out, he will try to bring to new, more brazen lies, and supported by 3 or 4 or 5 new forgeries, emails, contracts, deeds, whatever he's creating. And then it's a character that will not back off when he is losing one step. He will create 2 new steps that you have to try to debunk. So it grew on him to become Satoshi, because in the first 1.5 year, somewhat a year, he never said that he was Satoshi. He only said at some point, when he was testing the water in the year before, at some point it grew on him, hey, the next lie that I'm going to tell is, well, let's pretend to be Satoshi.
The position he's in now, then, he's almost dug himself a hole. He thought it's like there's people that they start with one lie and the lie just snowballs because they don't admit the truth early on. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, even in these early days, really, it's too late for him to back out, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Too many people depend on his lies, and he is in a state of mind where he loves to have the fame and the attention from this, well, rather small group, but for him it's enough to flourish in this group of people to be being honored and being how do you call it, being cheered upon as Satoshi. And the other 99% out there doesn't believe it, luckily. Otherwise, it would be much bigger. But yeah, that's how the guy rolls, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this reminds me a bit when people commit a crime. They can keep it quiet, they keep it to themselves for a little bit, and then they start bragging a little bit. And then slowly, they want everybody to know what they've done just because they're so proud of themselves. Could it be a case of this and he's just
No, I
now
compare it
he's
sometimes with, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I compare it sometimes there. I know a guy, I don't remember the name, I think it was an Indian name that the guy had, but he was a famous forger of old and expensive wines. And he that also grew from, hey, I can create one wine. And he made all of that at home, and he forged the labels on the bottles and everything he did himself, and it grew on him, and he made more and more and more bottles until he had a half of a winery at home, and they became more and more expensive. Those people, they don't, as long as they are not called out firmly enough, and that means in court, go to jail, get fined, or have a really firm penalty, then those people, they don't stop. They just grow bigger, like a cancer somehow. You have to realize that in 2015, that was half a year before this Wired and Gizmodo story, he was chased by the ATO already for 2 years, since, because already when he started with his Bitcoin bank stuff, he fraudulently got a few claims honored by the New South Wales Supreme Court, if I say this right, for some 56 million Australian dollars. And that was already a huge fraud that he performed there. And the ATO was chasing him for already 2 years. So halfway 2015, I think he felt the heat pretty hard, and he needed to bail out because the ATO already paid him a few million here and there on some tax returns that he had claimed, but they started claiming back. And at that point, he needed a bailout. At that moment, and I will never forget those dates because it was in June, Stephen Matthews and Robert McGregor, they called Calvin Ayre, who, for the outside world, he stayed in the background, but he was, of course, paying for everything that Craig needed in that bailout. But what happened is exactly in that bailout, Calvin Ayre bought the IP, what Craig Wright says was his IP, for $1.5 million, which was kind of a bargain, maybe. Yeah, presuming there's not not so much IP anyway, then it's probably even expensive. But for Calvin, I think he presumed it was a bargain. But in that bargain, Craig said, I will create you a shitload of patents, and we do not know this for sure, so I only say this out of my own opinion, that I think that might have happened also, because in halfway 2015, he already came up with that forgery of the Tulip Trust nonsense. And if he told Calvin Ayre that he was a holder of this 1 million bitcoins in the Tulip Trust, then he could also claim, I will share the profits of the Tulip Trust with you. Again, we do not have proof of that such a conversations have happened, but at least what we do know what happened was that he said, I will make you rich, I will make you guys billionaires on the patents that I'm creating around my intellectual property that I have here. So those patents become, of course, 10 times more valuable if they are written by the real creator of Bitcoin. you know. So I think it worked a bit both ways. I think Calvin pushed him, and Calvin and Stephen and the other people in that little what I sometimes call the fraud squad. They are there. They probably pushed him also. So it's a bit intertwined. I think he wants the spotlight. He needs the spotlight because it fits his character. And on the other hand, there's also this pressure from Calvin and friends that he should start performing.
There's more money, isn't there, for him to spend on hookers and cocaine?
Well, it's interesting because as part of the BBC interview that he did in 2016, there's a really fascinating bit where he says he quote "I have not done this because it is what I wanted." This is him being outed as Satoshi. I have not done this because this is what I wanted. It's not because of my choice. I really do not want to be the public face of anything. I would rather not do it. I want to work. I want to keep doing what I want to do. I don't want money. I don't want fame. I don't want adoration. I just want to be left alone. Which is an incredible quote from the man who has gone on, world media to claim he's invented the world's most famous cryptocurrency. That doesn't add up, does it?
It totally doesn't add up. I have a screenshot of which I consider also one of my treasures in my treasure box of forgeries and lies and frauds that he has done, which is that's probably also from that same BBC when they put subtitles under it, that he said, "I will do this only once, and I will never ever be on TV again, ever." Oh, and he's looking for the spotlight every time. So yeah.
So 2015, these articles come out, and he makes these claims and is almost kind of pulled out of the woodwork to admit, yeah, it's me. I created Bitcoin. Sorry, you've dragged it out of me. And then it all goes quiet for a bit once the doubters raise their voices. And then he reappears in 2016 on this bizarre block signing tour. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I only found this out recently, that it seems that this whole thing was concocted by a PR team around him. And it was spun by them. They almost had to get him to do it, but they made him realize the financial potential in continuing with the lie. Is that true?
Yeah, kind of. Then that is what he tells himself, that he is kind of forced to do this. I never believed it, because he loves to be on stage and to be in the spotlight about this. So, and when he because you're referring to the May 2016 outcome and several interviews and he faked a few signing sessions in April. Gavin Anderson passed by. So in that time. But it was of course, it was a media setup. He got media training from a specialist company for how to tell the right thing at the right moment, and how should he approach this. It totally failed, because you might remember that there's a brilliant video, I think of 10-15 minutes, and the only thing he's doing is screaming, shouting, scolding, cursing, and I think the QC or something, QC interview, and with the BBC also. It's, oh my God, embarrassing.
The BBC one is a car crash, because there's a point on that where the BBC journalist, who seems really out of his depth on this, he asks him, he says, "So did you create Bitcoin?" And Craig Wright pauses for a second, and then he says, "Yes." But in that pause, it's like if you're in the dock and the jury is watching you, and one of the prosecutions asks you that question, and if you reply in the manner that he says yes, you're guilty. It's an obvious lie.
Yeah.
Is the best one at the CoinGeek conference where he forgot that he wrote the white paper?
Yes, when he says, when I wrote it.
Yeah, about privacy, and I read about it when I wrote it. Yeah.
Brilliant moment.
I'm not sure anymore which deposition it was, but in some deposition, it was mentioned that he broke down. He couldn't do it, and he felt sorry about it later. I think he wrote some blog post about it. But yeah. What can you make of it? I mean, he cannot sign, so he has to come up with excuses to not sign, just like he did years earlier with the ATO.
But it's amazing that when in 2015 his attempt to be known as Satoshi was revealed to be pretty much a fraud because he leaked the emails himself. The fact that he tried again a few months later, I mean, obviously he thought this one was going to work, but again, is it just naivety? Is it blindness? Because if you've tried something once and you've thought, oh, these people actually know a bit more than I thought they did about this, how can you then think you're going to pull it off a second time?
I think it's a combination. He has this brazen style of how he is, and he probably practiced this signing with public information that was what everybody can use to sign. And if I say this right, there is a Satoshi block that has been signed, and there is some public information about it that you can reuse that information to sign again and make it look like it has been signed. He might have practiced this for a bit at home alone, and he thought he could get away with it if you pay attention to something like a wizard who is doing a trick, and you have to look at the right hand, and then the left hand is doing something else, and make the trick work. And that is how he was hoping to get this signing appear as a legit signing. And of course, because we have not been there, so we don't know exactly how he did it or how he tried to do it. But on the other hand, I think he was also nervous because he knew that, for example, people like Gavin Andresen, and if I'm right, at the BBC, there was also an expert joining the conversation. There were a few of those sessions. Maybe it was also the QC session, I don't know. But he might have broken down anyway because he knew that if he would try to perform the trick, they would see how he is forging the procedure.
It's like a sleight of hand almost.
Yeah, I think so.
After 2016, it kind of not goes away, but he hasn't tried anything quite as big since then, has he?
No. Only he started in late 2018, around the time that he was getting into this fight with Bitcoin Cash, because of course he joined. He was in those years he was still supported by Roger Ver. Don't forget, and so he felt that he should join the Bitcoin Cash. That's how he became a big blocker. I mean, Craig never was a big blocker. He grew to be a big blocker because of Roger Ver. I mean, but at late 2018 he started to write a blog on his blog, and there he was, let's call it phase 3 in his outcoming process. I'm now going to give you the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and everything but the truth. But it will take years because I'm going to post everything on my blog, and I will work on to make you a believer. Now, of course, he made a lot of mistakes there also. Allow me to mention one little anecdote, which is probably a rather important anecdote. The way he bamboozles, if we go back to this 2016 period, how he bamboozled Gavin Andresen, and this is not a very well-known anecdote, but for me it's quite important to mention. Gavin Andresen had a bullet list, I think, of 4 things that he wanted to discuss and have to see as a proof from Craig Wright. One of the things was, I will send you a little amount of Bitcoin on a Satoshi address, and you have to send it back to me. That is what Gavin Andresen said. Gavin sent a few Satoshis to that address, and then, of course, they never came back. What happened the next day, maybe 2 days later, that Gavin Andresen, who was asking Craig still, hey, can you send it back? Don't forget, right? What did Craig do to make the subject go away? He performed a suicide attempt at his home. But, of course, it was not a suicide attempt. It was a show, a drama. Of course, the ambulance came and he had to go to hospital and etc. But for Gavin Andresen, that was the moment that he thought, oh my God, this guy is, let's not disturb him anymore with my little detail about getting some Bitcoin sent back.
But do you have any proof that it was just drama and that he didn't actually try to kill himself? Because it is a bit, do you know what I mean? It's sort of one thing to say that, oh, he made up killing himself against, like, here's some actual proof that he didn't really do it.
Now, since I started this when Peter McCormack and Hodlnaut were chased for this, and I started my research and I started publishing things, you meet a lot of people. So you meet also insiders and people in the know, who I have to keep anonymous, of course, at this moment. And they know and have seen and have heard a lot more details that I'm telling here. And we know that he, for example, used ketchup. That is the word that has been used when this event was told to me in way more detail that I'm telling now. And the ambulance that came brought him to hospital, not for an operation or stitches in his neck, but for a serious health checkup. What's going on with this guy? Is he okay in his head? And he was wearing a towel. That towel quickly disappeared in a few days. Normally, you would expect a big, because he pretended to have sliced his throat with a knife, but that never happened. So there is no scar, no stitches, and etc. So that's how we know that we know for sure that this suicide attempt was a story making the rounds in a small circle back then. It is my presumption that was to avoid difficult questions at that moment, because of course there were a lot of difficult questions going his way. Gavin Anderson was only one of them. With his, can I have my Bitcoin back, please, from that Satoshi address? But because most of those signing sessions failed, of course he probably had some stress. So it makes sense that he did. He might have been emotional and stressed, but not to the level, because he is a cheater, he's a scammer. So instead of doing a real suicide attempt, he does a fake suicide attempt.
Do you think he's got mental health issues?
I always put a disclaimer on this subject, because of course, I can only say and give a little opinion, again, with saying that I'm not a medical expert, but it appears to me that of course, he has medical issues. And a few times on Twitter, I mentioned the guy should not only go to jail, he probably should go to hospital first, or go to jail with a hospital. That is, if he is ever convicted and ruled upon him as a criminal, which would make sense, I think. But he has, according to me, and discussing this also with a lot of people over time, it's a narcissistic syndrome that he has, and combined with being a compulsive liar who just can't stop when they start. And that combination is for him a deadly, well, not literally deadly, but the deadly combination that keeps him going to pretend to be Satoshi against all odds, because, except for his small cult that he gathered around him, there's hardly anyone is believing him. And for good reasons.
Yeah, your use of the word cult is a very interesting phrase, because that's the word that comes to mind. It's amazing how he's got this little cabal of people that just defend him to the death, and it's amazes me, because for a lot of them, he's just a guy that invented a cryptocurrency, not Bitcoin. He invented BSV. That's all it is. But he still has these people that have this link, this affiliation with him. He seems to have something of the cult leader about him.
Yeah. It's a second Jim Jones, I would consider. But what is peculiar about what people, when I follow discussions, like I said, I block most of them, and sometimes I peek through the blogs to see what kind of discussions are going on, and I see friends of me go into discussions with those people. And what is kind of peculiar to me is that because Bitcoin has an anonymous founder, they need a person to be a founder of this cryptocurrency, of Bitcoin. And they can somehow not live with the fact that Bitcoin has a founder who stepped back and who currently we don't know who and where he is. And those people, they need somebody. They just need a person, a face on top of Bitcoin. And the first question that they will ask you is, yeah, but if Craig is not it, who is it? And that is for me kind of peculiar. Why do they need a face on top of of Bitcoin? No idea.
Are you Satoshi?
Am I Satoshi? Good question. It's funny that I receive private emails sometimes, well, kind of a lot, and a few of them, I will keep your secret. You are Satoshi. And then in public I say, no, I'm not. I have a copyright claim and that puts my name next to Satoshi, so I can make a joke every now and then that I'm Satoshi. But no. Of course, I'm not Satoshi. I built up some knowledge, and I have way more respect for him and his project that has grown tremendously, I can say. But I lack coding. I lack understanding how he coded everything. And he had his flaws in coding, but he brought together, I think, more than a handful of good ideas that have been circulating in the cypherpunk and in cryptography world. And he brought it together and made a, kind of brilliant total of it. All the components together made Bitcoin. And I would never be able to do that. So, no, I'm not Bitcoin.
If it's not you, who do you think it is? Like, if you had to have one guess, you had to say it's this you think it's this person, who would you say?
Yeah, hard to say. I can only say that several names have been mentioned, from Nick Szabo to Adam Beck and Hal Finney, and those three together would make a good team, I'm sure. But I'm not going to say it's them. I can live very well with the fact that Satoshi is still anonymous, and we don't know who he is, and I can live with that, and I don't put any effort in researching who's the real Satoshi, because I think he wants to be private. I fully respect that, and even if I would know, I would not dox the guy if he told me. I would name Hal Finney, Nick Szabo, and Adam Beck together. They might have been able to pull this off, but if they did, no idea, probably not. All denied themselves.
The obvious one thing we do know is it wasn't Craig Wright. Aside from all the evidence that suggests that he's not, that you've been digging up and many others have dug up over the years, if you just look at the personalities of the people, from what we know about Satoshi, the behavior, the style of writing, the way he came across, the fact that he left in such early days because it was getting too big, unless he had a complete personality change and actually, he a few years later thought, no, I do want to claim credit for it. The guy that creates it in the shadows, stays purposefully in the shadows, does not come out 10 years later boasting to the world that he is actually the creator and offering up all these ridiculous proofs. They're two totally different people.
I mean, we even don't know if he's still alive, so maybe he will never come out. But if he comes out, it will probably have a good reason when he sees his project fail. I mean, Craig makes a good claim there because he sees his project fail, and that's the reason. And he mentioned that there's a reason why he's coming out and trying to save his project with BSV, pretending to be the real Bitcoin. What we do know, and for me that is also one of those important little things. You mentioned the language and the writing style, etc. Craig never coded anything important, so we can already say he is not a big coder. We know from some videos that he did for some university, pretending to do something with supercomputers, the guy just reads from a screen and pretends that he is a coder. But let's go back to 2011, because I think there we are nailing down the moment when he learned about Bitcoin. I'm talking about Craig Wright here, of course, that he learned about Bitcoin in 2011, and he wrote down a few times the name, the brand name Bitcoin. The guy could not even spell it right at that moment. And he mentioned it, I think, 3 or 4 times in the comment section on 2 different articles online. So we know that is untampered proof, because we can still find it back on that website and way down in the comment section, where he started mentioning Bitcoin. He couldn't even spell it right. He spelled it like BIT space coin, and then with a capital C, and sometimes with a small c, and again and again. And when you see through the history of, I think, roughly 600-700 posts or something that Satoshi did in his lifetime, between roughly August, I think, or otherwise October, but somewhere in 2008, he started to become known. And until the moment he left in December 2010, and he sent, I think, 1 or 2 emails in 2011 also, and he never misspelled in public the name Bitcoin. He always wrote it in the same style, in the same spelling. And then Craig jumps up a few months after Satoshi left, and the first thing he does is misspelling it 4, 5, 6 times in 3, 4 different online posts. Makes no sense, right?
What do you think is his end game, Craig Wright?
Yeah, that's hard to say. Currently, there are 3 cases running against him. Climate versus Wright is, of course, the most famous one, the most well-known. But of course, he still has also those liberal cases with Peter McCormack that we don't know so much detail about. And well, the same goes for Hodlnaut case. The only thing we know is that Hodlnaut is every few months he publishes a little update when he wins a battle, and he has now won 4 battles in a row since early last year. But what is his end game? I would think that not any of those lawsuits will bring him much fame and fortune, unfortunately. And the only thing what can happen then is that he disappears, that he is, well, Jim Jones is a bit, you might know what is Jonestown, where 600 or 800 people committed suicide. I hope that will not happen with this bunch of people, but I can see him quickly run away at the moment that his house gets raided again, or that they need money from him in the hundreds of millions or possibly billions, if the court case with Kleiman is going wrong for him. I expect also that Peter McCormack will nail him down on that he is called or ruled not being Satoshi Nakamoto. Same story for Hodlnaut. So he will lose every reputation that he has. What can he do? Make another clone of BSV and leave BSV to Calvin, although Calvin also said that he will leave BSV next year.
Yeah, I saw that
on Twitter. So, yeah, good question, guys.
I think, I mean, from my point of view, I can't see for someone that spent so much time and effort and money getting to this point, and he's got this little corral of people around him that believe him. If you look at it like the cult leader thing, even if he loses every case, he will find a way to twist it and spin it to the point where the people that have stuck with him to this point, they're never going to leave him now. Whatever happens from here, there will be that collection of people that still follow him, still believe him. So I personally can't see him disappearing. Like, I can't see him leaving. I can see him becoming much more of a peripheral figure. But he will always have this group of people that, for whatever reason, still believe him, won't he?
Yeah.
Butch and Sundance, isn't it?
And as long as Calvin is sponsoring him, I think that is also one of the reasons why he is keeping up appearances as a Satoshi pretender, because Calvin is sponsoring his lifestyle. So yeah, and he needs Calvin to be in check. So literally paying the check every month so he can keep continuing this kind of fancy lifestyle.
One last question I've got. Let's turn this on its head. From the research that you've done on Craig Wright and his claims, then what has he said that is true?
I'm gonna go with this name is true.
Yeah, but that is so much in the detail. It would probably be a way more interesting question. What would happen if it turns out that he is indeed Satoshi? That would be a very interesting question, because that would really turn the whole world upside down.
If you were to say to someone, this is the worst way you can go about proving something, he's pretty much done that, considering how easy it would be for him to prove his authenticity. If it turns out that he actually is, he's gone the long way around.
Yeah, but is there still a possibility that he comes up with a good story why it was necessary to do all this crap and frauds and lies and forgeries and etc. And if he has a good story, but he is still Satoshi, and this is actually what drives the BSV cult but he has to do it. He demolished all the evidence when he wanted to get rid of, because that is Craig's claim, he was not happy with all the crime and the heroin and blah, blah, blah stuff that was happening around Bitcoin in those years. Silk Road he mentioned, and those websites where people were buying illicit products and services. And that made him not being proud of his Bitcoin anymore, and he deleted all his stuff. So he had to recreate the evidence that he was Satoshi. And there he makes mistakes every now and then. And that is how the BSV cult sometimes explains why there is so much crap around this guy. But yeah, could there be a possibility? Yeah, I think it's small and even below zero, because I think the chances that he is Satoshi is below zero, if we could give it a chance with a negative number. But yeah, is there still a possibility? Maybe.
I think that's a fantastic place to leave it, because you can never be 100% sure of anything in this world. So let's leave it at 99.999, shall we? Arthur, it's been fantastic to have you on. Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting chat. I've learned some things I didn't know, and it's really good to get your point of view. So thank you for coming on to the FullyCrypto podcast.
You're welcome, and happy to have been here, guys.
Yes, thank you for coming. We've had a great time. I've learned quite a lot. I've been fairly quiet. I've just been enthralled by it all. It's just fascinating listening about him.
He's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't he, Craig Wright? He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great. Well, guys, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for listening. And we will speak to you again soon on another episode of the FullyCrypto podcast.
Ta-ta.